This video is sponsored by Stack Audio, manufacturers of the Orva speaker and equipment isolation feet used by a British audiophile. For more information about these and other products, please click the link in the description. Hegel launched a new amplifier this week, the H400. I'll try and pronounce it correctly. It's H, not H, but it's hard to correct the habits of a lifetime, so I'm sure a couple of you will be keeping tabs on how many H's creep through. Before I get started, there's a couple of things I want to get straight. I get the impression that some people think that I'm a bit of a Hegel fanboy. Certainly not the guys at Hegel. In almost 5 years of running this channel, I've only reviewed 3 of their products. One of those I shouldn't even count. I owned the H160 before I started my channel in 2019. My early videos were of my own products due to necessity, as there were very few manufacturers prepared to send me stuff when I got started. By January 2021, when I reviewed the H95, my rating system of recommended, highly recommended and outstanding was in place. I deemed the 95 worthy of my middle award, as it offered very good all-round performance for the asking price. I bypassed the H120 as it's almost identical in architecture to the 95 and reviewed the H190 in May 2021. It also received a highly recommended award. 2021 was still pretty early on in my reviewer's journey. At the time I felt that at a little over £3,000 the H190 would be comprehensively beaten by some purist pre-power combination. Years later, and after seeing off much competition, I had to admit to an error of judgment, and I officially upgraded the status of the H95 from highly recommended to outstanding. I don't think that qualifies me for being a Hegel fanboy. If you think so, I have to beg to differ. I do have a bone to pick with Hegel. I know why all Hegel amplifiers come with DACs and streamer modules built in. Removing them wouldn't result in much of a cost saving for the customer and would complicate inventory for Hegel. But I still think they should be optional. I wonder how many hi-fi purists dismiss Hegel amplifiers because they've got built-in DACs and streamers and they've already invested in external ones that they prefer. Actually, judging by discussions that I have on my Patreon consultancy, there's quite a few. Anyway, that's just something that I wanted to get off my chest. I don't think anything's going to change anytime soon, so enough preamble. I asked Hegel to drop off the 390 model along with the 400 so I could make comparisons between the two and also compare the H400 with my established benchmarks. So, how did I get on? The new H400 retails for £5,995, €6,995 and the same in US dollars. Externally it's indistinguishable from the outgoing 390 with identical chassis dimensions of 430 by 145 by 440 millimeters or 16.9 by 5.7 by 17.3 inches. It's a substantial unit at 20 kilograms or 44 pounds. The Scandinavian predilection for understated functionality remains unaltered. The H400's power button is placed discreetly below the front panel and dials for input selection and volume control flank the OLED display. Digital connectivity is comprehensive with, count them, 5 SPDIF inputs, 1 on BNC, 1 coaxial and 3 optical. There's a USB digital input and an RJ45 port which is required to operate the built-in streamer. A digital output is also provided. Analog connections are best described as sufficient, with 2 single-ended RCA and 2 balanced XLR inputs. There are both fixed and variable analog outputs. Finally, the supplied metal remote control is the same one that I use on my H190. The Hegel H400 has a different architecture to the models below, including the H190. Dual mono power amplifier modules are mounted to the left and right side panels for better channel separation. Adjacent are the heatsinks with 4 bipolar junction transistors per side. The H400 can produce 250 watts per channel into 8 ohms as opposed to 150 watts produced by the 190. That's thanks to a more substantial power supply with a larger toroidal transformer and more filter capacitance. There's a total of 8 capacitors, each rated at 10,000 microfarads. Switching to the H190 and you can immediately see that the circuit layout is quite different. Note the smaller size of the power transformer, the 6 filter capacitors totaling 60,000 microfarads and the 8 output transistors mounted in a bank to 1 heatsink. The H400 has a new VA board for the power supply, although changes at a component level are minimal over the 390. The preamplifier section has also been tweaked to improve performance, but the power amplifier section is identical to the outgoing model. Hegel's core technology is the Sound Engine 2, a feed-forward circuit that operates in real time in a similar way to noise-cancelling headphones. An analog computer samples the input signal and compares it to the output, applying a reverse phase of any errors to eliminate distortion. The digital board is completely new, with a much more powerful processor for the streamer and an upgraded DAC. According to Hegel, it's almost identical to the one found in the H600. All in all, it's clear what you're getting here, a significantly improved architecture with more power than the H190, minor tweaks to the analog section but an updated digital section over the H390. Okay, so this was a bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting that much difference in performance between the H400 and the H190. Normally when you step up in a manufacturer's product range, you get incrementally smaller uplifts in performance. I guess that's the law of diminishing returns. But that isn't what I experienced here. What you have to bear in mind is that I consider the H190 to be the best all-round performing amplifier I've encountered for circa £3,000. It delivers a clean 150 watts per channel with a totally natural presentation. The H400 is in a different league of performance. The noise floor is substantially lower, allowing a lot more detail to emerge. In fact, I'd say there's as much difference between the performance of the 400 and the 190 as there is between the 190 and the 95. The H400 throws out a substantially larger soundstage in terms of width, but especially in terms of depth. It's the kind of placement I've only experienced with the very best amplifiers I've reviewed on this channel. You feel as if you can close your eyes and tap the performers on the shoulder rather than fumbling to find their faces. The Accuphase E280 that I reviewed back in March 2023 has this precision in stereo imaging, but the Japanese amplifier that retails in the UK for £4,995 has a leaner tonal balance and nowhere near the bass control of the H400. Trilogy's £5,995 921 integrated is too close in fidelity to call out differences without both amplifiers being here together, but power is the differentiating factor. The 75 watt per channel Trilogy amplifier doesn't have the same scale or bass authority as the 250 watt per channel Hegel. Those two amplifiers run the H400 close, but they sound smaller, thinner and with less control. I haven't encountered this level of performance from an integrated amplifier before. The sheer expanse of the soundstage and how dark the background is from which notes emerge, it rivals my exposure pre-monoblocks. Now, for the sake of propriety, there is something that I should mention. My 21 pre and 18 super monoblocks may be 25 years old, but they were recapped with Nishikon and Rubicon capacitors about 5 years ago. The power supply filter capacitance on the monoblocks was also increased from 20,000 microfarads per channel to 80,000. Don't try that at home unless you know what you're doing. Anyway, an integrated amplifier shouldn't be competing with pre-monoblocks at this level. There are technical advantages to having sensitive preamplifier circuitry, left and right power amplifier channels all in separate enclosures, fed by independent power supplies and their own transformers. But the H400 does compete. I would say that it has a stereo image that's slightly more focused, transients which are crisper, and bass that is considerably tighter with less bleed through to the mid-range. My vintage exposure amps have more body in the mid-range, the texture to notes is better and the decay is a little bit more realistic, but choosing between these amplifiers is a matter of preference, and that puts me in a position that I've only encountered a couple of times before. The £3,925 MVA P50 SA and M600 monoblocks are exquisitely detailed. The sense of timing and the ability to extract minute detail is ahead of these Hegel and exposure amps. However, they fall behind when it comes to authority due to a modestly sized power supply. The Moor Angel Pre and Angel 4 power amp surpasses the Hegel H400 in fidelity and precision of imaging as well. They're a little bit more dynamic than the MVA combo, but a little politer than the H400. The Moor amp Pre-Power also costs £8,990. Making comparisons with the outgoing H390 model is interesting. It's a definite step up in performance going from the 190 to the 390, but I'd say it's an equivalent step up going to the 400 model and that's in all areas: soundstage imaging, bass control, mid-range resolution and top-end refinement. I know that the 390 model has the same power amplifier section as the 400, but whatever changes Hegel have made to the preamplifier and power supply sections clearly makes a difference. For 190 owners, I'd say that the 400 is a no-brain upgrade, but if you have the 390, you may want to take a moment to pause and consider what else you have in your system before upgrading, just to see where you get your best bang for the buck. Before I move on, I should take a moment to comment about the quality of the internal DAC, as it does seem to be the focus of Hegel's marketing of the new product over the old one. It's very good. It took a little while to run in, but it's a bit cleaner sounding and surprisingly has similar spatial abilities to my circa £1,000 R2R ladder DAC, the Denafrips Aries 12-1. It isn't quite as resolving as the Gustard R26 that retails for about £1,600, but you should be considering DACs above this if you want to get a worthwhile improvement over what comes in situ with the H400. I personally wouldn't suggest using anything below the quality of something like my Denafrips Venus 2. That retails for £3,100, so you are going to have to spend a little bit money on source components if you really want to hear the best out of this amplifier. One of the main reasons why Hegel have updated the H390 model is a more powerful streaming module, which means that they can accommodate their proprietary app. It's pretty basic and certainly won't be challenging Bluesound, Eversolo or Hi-Fi Rose for the quality of their user interface. The Hegel app does get the job done, supporting Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, UPnP and DNLA third-party apps. AirPlay 2, Chromecast and Airable Internet Radio are also accommodated. Over time, I expect the UI to become a bit more sophisticated, but the built-in streamer is perfectly acceptable for people who want to access supported services without customization abilities. If you want a little bit more flexibility, the H400 is Roon certified from launch, and the Roon music management system will give you more flexibility with things like parametric EQ, and if I remember correctly, there might be room correction there as well, if that's your thing. I can't see Roon users really looking for an external streamer unless they're chasing more performance than what the built-in DAC and streamer can provide. As for partnering equipment, I can't think of any speakers that the H400 will struggle to drive, although to hear what it's capable of you do need high-resolution speakers with good spatial qualities like the excellent £1,800 Quad Revela ones. My vintage Proac Response 1 SCs were also singing at the hands of the Hegel H400, not quite as articulate in the bass or expressive on top as the Revelas, but a little bit more nuanced in the mid-range. Most of my listening was done with the £5,000 Alta Audio Alyssas. It combines the best traits of the quads and the Proacs whilst adding greater bass extension and a little bit more resolution and finesse. To tell you the truth, once I hooked up the Alyssas, I didn't want to spend much time listening to anything else. £5,000 worth of speakers hooked up to £6,000 worth of amplifier with another £6,000 worth of digital front end is not a cheap system, but boy did it sound good for the money. Hegel have taken a very good amplifier in the H390 and made tweaks that accumulate to a noticeable improvement in sound quality. The H400 has oodles of power, a capable DAC, and a sound that is beautifully detailed, natural and spacious. I don't consider myself a Hegel fanboy. It still irritates me that the DAC and streaming modules aren't optional. I've had discussions with people at Hegel and the UK distributor that including them as standard puts some people off, but the H190 and the H400 still represent the best all-round performance I've heard from amplifiers at their price. If you're a hi-fi purist like me and you overlook them because they've got DACs and streamers built in that you're not likely to use, you do yourself a disservice. Yeah, not a Hegel fanboy, but perhaps on my way to becoming one. The Hegel H400 gets an outstanding from this channel. We've had discussions recently on this channel about purist versus convenient solutions, so that isn't my question for today, although if you want to weigh in on that issue, please do so in the comment section. My question for today is, what are you looking for in the next upgrade to your system, or perhaps you're happy with your system and you'd like to comment about that. I'm sure you know what to do by now. If you want to support me here and what I do, like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Check me out on Patreon. There's a couple of tiers you can access there if you think I can help you on your audiophile journey. Also check out the ABA Club on Patreon, which has some great ways to interact with me and fellow Patreons. But for today, for now, a British Audiophile, signing off.